the USA Emergency Broadcast Network, your source for reliable disaster preparedness information.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this station, its management, sponsors, or other hosts. If you have any comments or suggestions about this program, please contact us at radio@usaebn.org. That's radio@usaebn.org.
Welcome to the Zeta Report here on USA Emergency Broadcasting Network. We are live the first Mondays of every month. My name is Andre. I'm with USA EBN, and I'm joined on the Zeta Report by Nancy, leader from ZetaTalk.com. Nancy, are you there?
I sure am. I'm looking forward to today. I want to talk about looming starvation and the crop shortages we are having all over the world and what this means for you. I'll also jump in and talk about the Christmas hammer that we had in December, and which is massive hammering earthquakes in certain places, and the Australia fires. But before we jump into it all, let me read our standard disclaimer. In partnership with USA EBN, Zeta Talk and the Zeta Report will be discussing the challenges of living on a planet beset with change, rising seas, increasing earthquakes and volcanic activity, weather gone wild, and the worry of what to do in a worst-case scenario. We will also inject Zeta Talk prophecy on what is coming next and advice on readiness plans and safe locations. Whenever Zeta Talk is quoted, please remember that prophecy is not fact. It is opinion. It only becomes fact when it happens. The Zetas are remarkably accurate but have been wrong on occasion. Bear that in mind. For more information on this subject, please visit ZetaTalk.com or the Zeta Report on YouTube. Crop shortages should come as no surprise to those who have been following Zeta Talk. In May 1995, Zeta Talk stated that crop shortages would occur due to erratic weather. By 2009, drought had afflicted almost half of the planet. This alternated with devastating floods. But in early 2019, the effects of erratic weather on the food supply became obvious. Devastating flooding in the heartland prevented the spring crops from being planted and killed young calves. Quoting Economic Collapse blog in February of 2019. According to satellite data, at least 1 million acres of U.S. farmland have been devastated by floods. Not just flooding, but erratic heat can kill livestock. In early 2019, killer heat struck both Argentina and Uruguay, killing chickens and cattle. Quoting Strange Sounds in February 2019, hundreds of cows died from heat stress in Argentina in the last few days. This wave of hot temperatures was also reached in Uruguay, where more than 100,000 chickens have already died. Just months later, in October 2019, Brazil had a sheep die off from unseasonable cold. The sheep had been shorn of their wool, and then the cold descended. Quoting Peperi.com in October 2019, a vet was reported to have been on the scene and testified that the animals had died from the cold. Following the heat wave that hit the entire state of Rio Grande do Sul, the owner of the resort would have sheared all sheep without imagining that in recent days an intense cold would hit the region again. Sudden cold affected the canola crop in Canada in November 2019 when it was buried under snow. It will have to wait until spring to be harvested, but how much crop will even be left? Quoting Scott.net on November 15, 2019, harvest from hell, 2.7 million acres of canola left buried under snow to the Canadian prairies. Heavy snow and rain during harvest on the Canadian prairies have left several million acres of canola buried until spring. Canola is renowned as Canada's most profitable crop, exported to China, Japan, and Mexico to make vegetable oil and animal feed. With immune systems in man and animal affected by the particle flows swirling as Nibiru approaches, epidemics can affect the food supply too. China's hog production was clobbered by swine flu this fall, quoting CNBC in October 2019. China's hog herd fell by half in the first 8 months of 2019 due to a devastating outbreak of African swine fever and will likely shrink by 55% by the end of the year. Quoting Strange Sounds in October 2019, be prepared for food price dramatic increases. Here's some recent shocks on the global food supply. India is one of the top exporters of onions globally. After the prolonged monsoon rains, India has decided to ban its onion export. Since September 2019, food prices have soared by more than 200% in the country. In Venezuela, at first, there are higher prices, then certain foodstuffs simply not available, long waits until the shelves are stocked, then the shelves simply are not stocked at all. At first, dietary changes, less meat, and more fruit and oatmeal and scrambled eggs, for instance. The experience in Venezuela is that Maduro encouraged pumpkin growing in backyards, but few citizens took up this practice. Farming in Venezuela has been destroyed because the Maduro government had failed to order tractor parts and failed to save and distribute seed to the farmers. So how will mankind react to crop shortages? Primarily, they will ignore it. Quoting Zeta talk on this matter. Except for those few who have prepared, humans surviving the cataclysms will find themselves without food. In the cities, this will happen quickly, as canned and dried foods will only go so far. Then what? Rural areas, where one would presume to find gardens put in and livestock in abundance, will not be much better off. The drought and irregular weather will have taken their toll, to say nothing of the cataclysms themselves. In general, the resistance against change is immense, and warnings about pending pole shift will be brushed aside by the vast majority who will choose not to notice the signs about them or contemplate anything so awful. Those groups who have prepared and are relying on themselves and their own carefully tended gardens will not find themselves pinched between starvation and hostilities. Fortunately, the easiest produce to grow is that most economical, as foodstuffs. Humans have but to return to their recent past and relearn those lessons. End of the quote from Zeta's. It has been computed that 1 acre can sustain a homestead. This assumes room for livestock, such as cattle, so pasture and hay fields would be included. Quoting Mother Earth News in 2011, start a 1 acre self-sufficient homestead. In order to derive any sort of living from that 1 acre without the application of a lot of artificial fertilizer, it would have to be heavily manured. Chickens for eggs, meat, and pest control are the top livestock choices on most homesteads. Without cattle, less room is needed. A self-sustaining garden would be housed on a typical suburban backyard. Free-ranging chickens that scratch and peck in the gardens. They do not need extra room beyond a coop for nighttime roosting and protection from predators. Roosters are a necessary evil, even though they may attack at times, as they will defend the hens from hawks and dogs and, needless to say, allow those spring chicks to be born. Chickens can be kept almost anywhere. They scratch and search for bugs and earthworms, but are omnivores and will eat vegetables too. When I kept chickens, I used to toss them melon rinds, and they would eat the entire thing. Give them eggshells, which they will consume for calcium, so they Give them back their eggshells. Don't throw them away in the garbage. They do need a minimum of sunlight to keep their bones from going soft. I note hobby farms in my area have chicks out for a few hours a day, even in winter, for that sunlight. One of the hens will be a brooder for the rest, all laying their eggs in one nest. And then there sits the brooder on top of 18 eggs, a huge number, and all the other hens are running around going partying, presumably dancing. Permaculture techniques are what I call lazy gardening, as one disturbs nature as little as possible. Compost falls and rots in place, for instance. Phenomenal results are reported, quoting Return to Now in 2017. Permaculture gardens produce 7,000 pounds of organic food. The family has converted the remaining tenth of an acre into a tiny food forest that produces 7,000 pounds of food per year with no synthetic fertilizers. What's the secret to their abundance? Permaculture methods that mimic Mother Nature to create nutrient and bacteria-rich soil. End of the quote from Return to Now. Quoting Small Footprint. Growing Power in Detroit is one of the most famous examples of urban permaculture in the U.S. and produces 87,000 pounds of food per year, including fish, honey, eggs, and milk on less than 2 acres in the heart of Detroit. End of the quote from Small Footprint. Growing Power was born in Milwaukee in 1993, and the operation is still growing, quoting WUWM in 2019. Inside one of the greenhouses is a tank teeming with 1,400 perch, raising fish early on tilapia and more recently lake perch in closed-loop systems is one of Growing Power's success stories. Water circulates, carrying fish waste to fertilize plants, which in turn clean the water. End of the quote from. Cities may not have the lawns that suburbs do, but they have tree banks. An enterprising resident in L.A. planted banana trees along the streets until he was ordered to remove them. The cops said it was blocking their visual cams from up above, the helicopters or whatever. So down with the banana trees, but they were producing. Goats are another survival addition. They have many advantages from being easy to herd, bonding with and following their herdsmen, and eating virtually anything, including poison ivy. Their milk and cheese is equivalent to that produced from sheep and cows. I often look at the lush grass along our roadsides, mowed, but going to waste. How many goat herds would that feed? Sheep likewise produce meat and milk, and their wool keeps the family warm. We waste so much. It's just, there's so many practical steps that can be taken, and folks, I am suggesting you take them. The sooner you get into gardening and keeping livestock, the better you will be. There is a learning curve, and gathering and preserving seed is top of the list. It seems easy, just buy a packet from the store. But what happens when the store shelves are empty? Some seeds are easy, like shucking corn or dry beans, but others are tricky. Amaranth plants shed their seeds daily, so shaking the seed heads into an umbrella captures them. Tomato seeds need to be fermented, covered with mold, before they will sprout the next year. Practice this stuff. You have to make a few mistakes before you get it right. Make those mistakes this upcoming year. Don't wait. For some without access to soil and space, or restricted by city laws, there are other ways to prepare. If you are near a coastline or anticipate being in a flood zone, plan for houseboat living. Houseboats can be linked together to form floating communities. The oceans will be lush with fish due to being dusted by the red iron oxide dust in Nibiru's tail, which has been scientifically shown to increase ocean vegetation 20-fold. This is already in process, as the rebound of the humpback whale shows. The humpback is rebound because the little shrimpies that they eat, have rebounded because they eat the phytoplankton, which have rebounded because there's now iron in the oceans from the tail of Nibiru. All that red dust that the media keeps claiming is anything but Nibiru. They never say Nibiru. Never say the N-word. Other survivors might find themselves foraging, living off the land until they can arrive at a survival camp where food production is in process. Mother Nature does provide with all essential vitamins provided by weeds and bugs. As the USAEBN show on January 4th, 2016, and Zeta Talk newsletter number 484 on January 10th, 2016 detail. This is one of my, I keep mentioning this because you got to remember, if you run out of vitamins, you don't have to have scurvy or beriberi or rickets and all that stuff. It is so simple. You do have to eat weeds and bugs. Okay, but beyond that, no vitamin deficiencies. Kudzu is edible, and the duckweed on ponds is high protein. Ignore the yuck factors and plunge into eating bugs and worms, which are also highly nutritious and bland, not bitter. You're like eating a little piece of cardboard, That's what it's been described to me. In all honesty, I do not eat bugs, but if I had to, I would plunge in. Although I did eat earthworm soup when Ichi was here, yes, and it tasted like chicken, yes it did. Andrea and I have covered bare-bones survival often on this show, and this information is still available on the USAEBN archives. Last covered June 3rd, 2019, and earlier on September 7th, 2015. This overview can be found on the Zeta Talk website in newsletter 514, posted August 7th, 2016. A quick rundown includes making fire via a friction bow or Bic lighter flint. Matches will run out eventually. Now presume you are out of the rain and keeping warm and dry. Perhaps you have camping equipment such as tents. Temporary shelters can also be constructed out of tarps or the debris left behind by high winds. The next step is being able to distill your drinking water to get rid of heavy metals and pollutants. There are several methods, from boiling water over a fire to passive distribution using the heat of the sun. Even seawater can be distilled using these passive methods. Now, presumably, you have clean drinking water. One can live a long time without food, consuming body fat and muscle, but can live less than a week without drinking water. Now, depending on your level of preparation, you will either be living in a survival community or setting up a survival camp with the supplies you gathered ahead of time, or trying to partner with others so your skill set and supplies equals a survival community, or living with a lot of regrets. Hopefully, you will not be starving. Quoting Zeta Talk on starvation in the aftertime, after the pole shift. What will modern man find he has to eat after the shift, when the supermarkets are looted and no new distribution on the way? Those in the cities who have never had experience with gardening and herd keeping or fishing in the wild, which requires skill, will have the rudest shock. First, they will be isolated in their cities by the destruction around them, such that they cannot easily travel to the countryside. Second, food will run out in the cities such that the starving survivors look about them and even at each other hungrily. Most will starve, getting weaker and sicker until death overtakes them. Those in the suburbs who have land about them and are perhaps conjoined with the countryside will at first deplete their personal stores, the local food markets, and then begin roaming into the countryside. The family pets will be killed and roasted. and that fat so much desired to be shed will be used just to keep the body going for many months. Eventually, suburban families will need to forage, turning over logs in the woods to look for grubs and worms, and attempting to fish in nearby streams or rivers. Those in the country who farm or are familiar with gardening and hunting practices will take a different tack from the start. Chickens eat bugs, forage for themselves, and come home to lay their eggs if given a safe and sound and private roost. Ducks otherwise eat whatever grows in or around ponds, which will be numerous in the drizzle, and don't require a dry spot to roost. Goats, which eat anything, and pigs, which root in the ground for whatever, can likewise be kept within limits if the surrounding country can sustain them. End of the long quote from Zeta Talk. And by the way, the Zeta Talk prediction of the oceans will be lush, that was proven by the red dust falling on the oceans and the humpbacks' resurgence. Not just the humpbacks, but all kinds of ocean fish are making a comeback. The kelp, etc. It's all edible stuff. And guess what? When they showed in scientific experiments, casting red dust on the ocean, and there you go, lush green underneath. Well, lush means green. So the oceans will be lush, turn green, well, and the ocean fish rebound. That's a Zeta Talk accuracy prediction come true. Now I'd like to talk just a little bit about the Christmas hammer, because we just passed the Christmas season. The Christmas hammer is from the magnetic trimesters, which the Zetas describe as being related to the Earth, the whole solar system being in a larger magnetic bubble. Not just the sun's magnetic field, not just the Earth's magnetic field, but the whole solar system is within something that's really big. And mankind has discovered that, and they called it a magnetic ribbon running outside of the solar system. And I read, the Zetas described a periodic increase in earthquakes in late December as the Christmas hammer, and ascribed it to a magnetic flux in the universe affecting the Earth 3 times a year in April, August, and December. And the December flux was the strongest of the 3. This magnetic whopping causes an increased daily Earth wobble, thus jerking the Earth plates about and thus increase in earthquakes. The Acre earthquake and tsunami hit on December 26, 2004, for instance. Everybody remembers that. It was like a 9.5. 240 people drowned by the tsunami. It was big, big, big. In the fall of 2009, NASA announced they had discovered a magnetic ribbon at the edge of the solar system, confirming what the Zetas have always said about our solar system and the sun being caught in a larger magnetic field that dominates the vicinity. The new NASA IBEX results were published in the October 16, 2009 issue of the journal Science. So, this is our magnetic field, for instance, has those lines drawn from the North Pole to the South Pole. Those lines actually exist, and they do around the sun, too. There's a magnetic flow. The magnetons are flowing like it's a little bitty river. You know, it's not uniform like an umbrella would be. So this ribbon that they discovered was a flow of magnetons outside the solar system, and there it was. The big 9.5 quake in Sumatra occurred on December 26, 2004, during the Christmas hammer. Yet days before, the quake chart showed a dead calm. For the Zetas, changing from one trimester to another is a vulnerable time for planet Earth. Thus, the dead calm followed by plate movement. It is a changeover, one trimester stopping, another starting. In 2011, the hammer hit on December 23rd at Christ Church. In 2019, quakes were strong and highly active worldwide during the year, but as noted on the USGS charts, a calm set in as November progressed. With the hammer that the southern tip of Mexico is getting, it would seem that the New Madrid adjustment might be close at hand. Nancy, was expecting the New Madrid to trigger and rip during this last Christmas season because we were having so many quakes to begin with. I said, the hammer will push us over. Came very close. The bowing tension in the North American continent is palpable. The outer edge of the bow is so taut that bays, especially, will rip open. The town of Liverpoint, Nova Scotia, on the outer edge of the seaway was pulled so taut that the land temporarily sank. This is the bow being pulled so tight that it is snapping. It's not an accident that a derailment happened at the Harper's Ferry Bridge at the Potomac River on December 23rd, just 4 days after the Nova Scotia high tide. Then, just as it seemed the Christmas hammer might be over for 2019, Vancouver Island was hammered on December 23rd with several strong quakes. On December 24th, the hammer dropped on Columbia. And by hammer, I mean, and if you go to see my YouTube, you'll see this, the area was solid, not just a circle saying, oh, we had a quake, but, you know, bah, 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 like that, 5 or 6. And these were big. They were like 4, 5, 6 magnitude. And, you know, since they've dumbed down the magnitudes, this is really 6, 7, 8, maybe even 9s. Bah, 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 bah. Okay. The 23rd up there in Vancouver, 24th in Columbia. Oh, late on December 25th, the hammer dropped on the edge of the Indo-Australia plate, which the Zetas call the break during the plate movements. Because when this plate lifts and you have the Indo-Australia plate dive under the Himalayas, it lifts in New Zealand and the Eastern Australia. Okay, so there it was in the Loyalty Islands. Bah, 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 bah. And then a little bit later that day, up there in Kamchatka. Wow, solid red circle. Bah, 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 bah. So I said, well, then it stopped. And I said, come on. We went all the way around the Pacific. Where's our New Madrid adjustment? Let's get this behind us. You know, let's so we can move on and admit Nibiru is real and people can get into gardening and So, but it stopped. But I did notice that at the very end, over there, between the tip of South America and the tip of Africa, where the new land will poke up, according to the Zetas, the Pacific compresses and that squeezes the Antarctic plate. And it makes it pop up there between the tip of South America and tip of Africa, and that's where the new land will emerge. Well, right at that spot, blah, 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 blah. It was not a real strong hammer, but it was hammered. So that was the end of it, and we went back to sleep now. And now I'm still watching the New Madrid area, you know, right there in that area every day for the last 5 days is a quake from 1.5 to 2.5, which you know is up to 5, magnitude 5. And if you talk to people in that area, they will tell you that that iron house is rattling and things are falling down all the time. That's waiting to go. And when it goes, it's going to be big, and it's going to wrap up to Chicago and under the Seaway and tear the Mississippi bridges and just keep going. Once those rock layers rip apart and the fingers that hold and prevent movement have been broken, there's no stopping it, you know, and it'll go. And it'll rip open the Atlantic. There's signs that the Atlantic is opening up. What we have is around the Canary Islands is jittery on the seismographs. The whole rest of the world can be asleep, but there's the Canary Islands. Well, that's right there on the plate border between Africa and the big Eurasian plate, as is the line through the Mediterranean. Lots of signs that, you know, Africa is rolling. Cracks opening in Libya, big crevasses, for instance. You know, to say nothing of all those Albania quakes we had about a month ago, blah, 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 in Albania. You know, so things are on the move. I also wanted to mention, because we talked about the Indo-Australia plate rising there in New Zealand, why we're having such hot fires in Australia. Yes, they had a drought. Yes, just as California had a lot of drought before their very hot fires. But is there more to this picture? In California, it was the subduction of plates from the Pacific sliding down between the rock layers deep under California. This makes for hot Earth. Where's the heat going to go? Friction causes heat release. Well, in Australia, when that plate lifts up there under eastern Australia, there's a void. There's a big empty chamber. Well, magma flows in, hot magma, and flowing rapidly. Well, this is a river of hot magma that is new to the area. That's heat. Where does it go? I wanted to point out this business about, oh no, it was just the drought. And hopping, burning kangaroos, poor things, setting fires and spreading the fires. Just, the whole continent is practically, the whole East Coast is at least ablaze. Go inland where that big aquifer is. In the eastern half of Australia, for almost that entire region, there is a huge aquifer. And you know what? No fires there. No fires. Just along the coastline. Just wrapping around by Tasmania. Why wouldn't there be fires over the aquifer? Well, because it's a buffer between the hot magma and the surface area. And Andre, I'm finally run out of words.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will say there's a lot to be said about the hot Earth hotspot theory being proven out with this. There's a lot more burning around the globe than just Australia, by the way. There's a lot of fires going on. We don't see it so much in the States right this type of year, but if you look around especially on the coast, it's just the coasts of Australia that are burning. I'm like, the interior is dry too. It's just being protected. It's not getting as hot as the edges that are being agitated, I guess, by the magma.
Yes. There's very, very little inland, and it seems to run around the coastlines, oddly, but it was notable to me because that's where I should think it would be burning the most, because the interior would be less likely drained of the rainfall. The rain always flows toward the coast, so that's what the Zeta said, and they're always right. So I keep mentioning USA EBN iPods and my YouTube and my newsletter on some of these survival techniques. You should go through those primers, folks, and take notes. Some of these steps are so simple. You can grow things in your house, on your windowsill, on your porch, container gardening. You learn to fertilize. Some people pee in a bucket and use that to fertilize their garden. I'm serious. These are simple permaculture steps. Some people flow the soapy water from their laundry into the garden because soap is a nutrient and the water need not go to waste. Practical steps that our grandparents knew. Or if you've got an oldster in your vicinity, go and pick their brain. Ask them. Go out in the country to some of these small family farms that have gone bankrupt, but the oldsters are still living there. They have, hand tools, and they invariably keep chickens and maybe a hog. They buy a piglet young. They keep the hog and they have it slaughtered in the fall. Or to watch Dr. Pole, the veterinarian. I watch that regularly. And you see about keeping cows and pigs and sheep and what kind of problems arise and what to do about it. So it would be a fun adventure for the kids. Don't spend your money at Disney. Well, go down. We're taking a ride and now we'll starve to death. Take them out in the country. And I'm serious. Say, we're going to spend 3 or 4 days here with Uncle Joe, right? And learn how he does all this stuff. And then they can do show and tell at school, and it'll be like, oh, cool. Bring a baby chick home with you and let it be in the garden with you. These are ideas, that people, unless you prefer starving and chewing on shoe leather, as the Zetas once said, you will be so hungry. fortunately, at some point when you starve, you go almost comatose. At first, there's the cramps, and the gnawing at the belly, in the belly, and you're hungry and you're not. Then that stops mercifully, and you just get kind of woozy and dizzy and stumble around, and lay there until finally your heart stops, I guess. But you're not in excruciating pain until the end, which is a godsend, I must say. So you will have an out, but you will have many regrets.
Yeah, I mean, self-sufficiency starts with, you don't necessarily have to have land. I mean, as a city dweller myself, but I grew up on a farm. I just say that you can access community garden situations, or you can do a patio or a deck container gardens, or use a pallet as a way to container garden with that, or downspouts from there's a lot of different ways to do it. I know you mentioned Mother Earth News, and they're not a sponsor of us, but I do appreciate their content. I have for many years. What they do is kind of break down what self-sufficient type living would be, and it's a magazine format, but I think they do have a website as well. But and then the whole tiny house thing is kind of taken a whole. People are catching on to that in the last 5 or 6 years. I've noticed too, and those are mobile houses that are obviously small, but built on that whole sort of you only need what. Necessity is the key, because you don't have a lot of space, and if you need to, you can also move the residents to another safe location. The only problem with tiny homes that I see, the ones that are mobile, is much like an RV or a mobile home. Once the winds start to pick up, or tornadoes, you're kind of in trouble because it's not tied. It's not. It doesn't have a foundation that's actually tied into the earth. It's
you have to tie it
blocks.
Down.
That's a problem.
They could do that,
but,
right? Ropes and cables. They could tie it down between trees and that kind of thing. Yeah.
I do appreciate the fact that people are catching on that self-sufficiency and off-grid living is not just for dirty hippies. No offense to hippies, but
yeah. It's a phenomenal movement, really, when you think, and it's kind of billed, this would be fun. This is fun. And it shows up in ads even. They have ads that feature these things, I think there's a moving company that says we have pods. You can store all your stuff in the pod. Sell your house and get a tiny house and drag it around. And if you need more, you can just call up the pod people and we'll come and bring you what you need. So that the idea is that mobility and the tininess, those are the two factors. Meanwhile, simultaneously, we have the rich getting gaudier and gaudier, with their super yachts and their big underground bunkers. And it always strikes me that they have no way of feeding themselves once their supplies are gone. What do they think? That these yachts are going to, roll up to some pier and buy everything they need, and that their money is going to be worth something? They do. They think like that. And these big bunkers that they go into, I remember one, it was so funny. They had like 6 pineapple plants in a row. And this was some place that would house maybe 200 people. See, we grow food. 6 pineapple plants. So, kind of pathetic. And obviously they're going to just have, freeze-dried or dried or canned and all that kind of thing. That will last you a week, and there you are. So they do think, they obviously think, they'll come out after the winds have died down and said, well, now I'm the king of the mountain here, and I've got a lot of money. Where do I buy my goods from? Where am I going to buy my food from? And people will pretty quickly understand that their money is worthless. If you can't eat it, it's not going to be worth anything. Or if you can't use it to grow food, like garden tools. Seeds, hose, shovels, whatever, fish hooks. That's the valuable stuff.
I think that part of this thing with the luxury massive yachts that these folks are acquiring or have already, and kind of goes hand in hand with the whole get off the earth, go to Mars, SpaceX, Blue, all these, the Amazon space program and all that other things.
Right.
I think it's just a getaway technique. I'm just trying to get away from being arrested, or well, I mean, if the water's going to rise, you can always go on your luxury yacht. But what's going to happen? Hopefully you have some fishing poles on that thing, and then eventually you're going to run out of supplies. Fuel or fresh water or rations, any of the above, medical supplies. Eventually you're going to have to dock it and get more. So where do you think that's going to come from with the tsunamis and every earthquakes and high winds and fires taking out every coastline there is? It's like, what's the plan there? Well, I got a bunch of money. I'll be fine. I'm famous.
Yeah.
So that's
cool. They show that
in Bulgaria.
They're so sad. They're going to, destroy themselves and turn on themselves, and everybody will be running around barking orders, and nobody will be following. Well, the Zeta said this whole thing about Musk and Mars and Elon Musk, and that it's a con game. And he knows they're not going to get to Mars or to the moon. That the tail is already flinging debris everywhere. And besides, the Zeta said the Council of Worlds won't allow the elite to escape. They didn't tell the common man. They didn't, share the information that they had with the common man. They're going to have to suffer with the common man, and that's the way it is, karma. So that he's basically just collecting money. Invest in me, and we'll do this, and we'll do this. And meanwhile, by the time we arrive at the pole shift, he will have super prepared with all this money that everybody gave him, and you won't be able to find him. Where was his headquarters again? Under that whole town collapsed, didn't it? And that's his plan. He'll spend the money now and not worry about tomorrow. But the whole thing about the yachts, not just tsunamis. How do these super yachts or even big boats do? If you have a big wave, it rolls it inland or against the coastline, and then it tips over, and the water recedes, right? And there sits the yacht, and they require, a water depth to be upright. So now it's on its side. And the hordes of people out there in the countryside say, let's clamber aboard the super yacht and see what kind of foods they have in their kitchens, right? Well, good luck, folks. It's not going to work. This was asked early on of the Zetas, when you have all these tsunamis and washing and sloshing in the oceans, can't you have like a submarine? Well, yeah, they said the submarine would work, but you bring it up to the surface afterwards and say, now I'm out in the middle of all this water. Which direction do I go to go to land? Guess what? The stars are covered by the hazy drizzle clouds. Your compasses don't work because you've just had a polar shift, and the core of the Earth is roiling and going around and around and around. Every compass is going to be crazy and saying something different. So the submarine putzes around out there going in all different directions until finally everybody starves to death again. So that there's, Zeta Talk, by the way, has a wealth of information on these subjects and a very good search engine on the website. So you're better off, if houseboat communities, if you're going to be in an area that's going to be inundated and remain flooded afterwards, you can build your houseboat, and I know people who are doing this, and tie it